I was about 10 or 11 years old the summer this happened. Back then, my dad used to take me fishing and hiking almost every weekend. It was his way of helping me cope with some bad things that had happened recently. It was always just us. I can still picture the drive, windows rolled down, music blasting, my dad drumming the steering wheel as we climbed up into the mountains. We parked near the lake, unloaded our gear, and he set up the poles. I helped, but I got bored quickly. 10-year-olds don't have much patience for fishing. That's when I spotted frogs hopping along the edge of the water. So I asked, "Dad, can I go look for tadpoles?" He nodded, told me to stay close. Dope. Now here's the thing. At 10, I was still a kid, but I had started developing early. I knew, even then, that adults looked at me differently. I knew to be wary of strangers. But I was also a stupid kid, easily distracted. I wandered along the shoreline in my little bathing suit, eyes glued to the water, crouching down every so often to poke at the ripples. That's when I heard a voice. A casual hey. I looked up. About 20 feet out into the lake, perched on a big rock, sat 3 or 4 guys. A few more splashed in the water around them. I couldn't see all the way around the rock. There might have been more. It looked like they could have been my older brother's age. Teenagers, maybe late teens. And because of that, I didn't feel scared. I said hi back, then went right back to my tadpoles. They made small talk. I don't remember all of it, but one thing stuck. They asked me what kind of dog I liked. Without thinking, I said a husky. Their response came immediately. "Oh wow, we've got a husky at our cabin. Want to come meet it?" I didn't feel a red flag. Didn't sense the danger. The only thought in my head was, better ask Dad first. So I told them, yeah, I'll go ask my dad, and I walked away. Not because I was scared. Not because I thought anything was wrong. Just because that was the rule. Ask first. I ran back to where my dad was fishing. "Hey Dad," I said, "I met some guys about my brother's age, and they said I can meet their husky. Can I go?" My dad froze. He looked at me like I had just said something insane. Then his voice sharpened. The heck? No, this was my dad. Overprotective, the kind of guy who once stood between me and a bear. The kind of guy who once kicked down a locked door when he thought I was missing. He was not about to let me wander off with strangers. He stood up immediately, started asking questions, and told me to show him where I'd met them. I figured he just wanted to check out, maybe talk to them, maybe make sure it was safe. In my head, I still thought I'd get to meet a dog. We walked back to the spot by the water, but the rock was empty. The water was still. They were gone. I was confused. Dad was annoyed. And for the rest of the trip, I wasn't allowed to leave his side. I'm 28 now. For years, I didn't think much about it. It was just a weird little memory, me wanting to pet a husky and Dad saying no. But recently, it hit me how bad that could have gone. If I hadn't asked, if I had just followed them, if my dad hadn't been there. I realize now that the only thing standing between me and possibly being taken, trafficked, or worse, was the fact that I obeyed that simple childhood rule. Always ask your parents first. Back in 2006 or 2007, my best friend B and I were sophomores in high school in rural upstate New York. We've been inseparable since 3rd grade. Her mom, Shelly, considered me a second daughter. I had clothes and toys at her place, even family photos on the wall. Shelly was divorced and used dating sites like eHarmony. She'd been talking to one guy for weeks, gushing about how charming and manly he was. She always showed us profiles before she actually met the men, saying she needed her daughter's stamp of approval. This guy's profile was strange. The headline read, "Looking for a strong mother." It talked about his love of cold steel and working in a foundry that kept his icy heart just warm enough. Creepy. I told Shelly it sounded off, but he was handsome enough, black hair, trimmed beard, fit for a man in his 40s. Against our better judgment, B and I told her to go for it. The night of the date, he was supposed to drive 2 hours to meet her. B and I helped Shelly pick out her outfit, fixed her hair, and then went upstairs to paint BEA's room while we blasted music. That's when it happened. A man's voice behind us. Well. Didn't know I was getting a 2-for-1 deal. We froze. Neither of us had heard the door open. The dogs hadn't barked. He was just there, standing in the room with us. He sauntered toward us like he had all the time in the world. The smell of cigarettes followed him. His hair wasn't jet black like in the pictures. It was salt and pepper. And his eyes weren't blue. They were black. Not brown, black. Like his pupils filled the entire socket. Before I could even ask who he was, Shelley came running up the stairs. She stopped cold when she saw him between us. The man immediately changed tone. "Shelley, you look beautiful." I knocked. Nobody answered, so I let myself in. "These are your girls?" "Beautiful, just like their mommy." The way he said mommy made my skin crawl. B and I exchanged a silent look. We were both freaked out. Shelley forced a smile, told him next time to ring the bell, then let him hug her like it was no big deal. As she led him back downstairs, we frantically texted her what he'd said to us. 10 minutes later, Shelley returned, shut the door, and asked if we were okay. She apologized, said he didn't mean it that way, and that he thought we reminded him of his daughters. She promised to check in hourly while on the date. We wanted to trust her, but we both knew something about him was wrong. Hours later, her last text read, "I'm okay, but officially freaked out. Coming home now." When headlights hit the driveway, Shelley jumped out of his truck before it even stopped, jogged to the door, locked every bolt, and whispered, "Keep the lights off. Upstairs. Now." From BEA's window, we watched his truck idle in the driveway. That's when Shelley told us what happened. He had taken her to a remote log cabin near Bethel. Talked about how easy it was to get her alone. Kept calling her a strong mommy and asking if she would sacrifice herself for her girls. At one point, he pulled out his flip phone, filled with photos of B and me. Pictures he must have stolen off Shelley's Facebook. When she insisted on going home, he finally agreed, but switched her into his work truck. In the back were chains, a bolted desk, and a duffel bag that smelled like bleach and metal. As they pulled into our driveway, Shelley played it cool. But when he got out of the truck carrying that duffel bag, the sheriff pulled in right behind him. The man panicked, threw the bag into his truck, tried to ram his way out, then tore across the lawn into the night. The sheriff checked on us, promised other units were waiting down the road. We never heard if he was caught, but we did get eerie Facebook messages for months afterward. 2 of them we knew were from him. It's been over a decade, but B and I still talk about that night. The man who looked almost like the pictures, but wasn't. The man who walked into our home and into our nightmares. That night, the rain was pouring. It was back in the days before cell phones, and I was 18 years old, walking a long, lonely road home after pulling a double shift at work. I was exhausted, soaked to the bone, and the miles ahead felt endless. That's when an old car pulled up beside me. Behind the wheel was an elderly man with gray hair and a limp smile. He leaned out the window and asked if I needed a ride. At first, I hesitated. I knew better than to trust strangers. But the storm was brutal, and when I glanced into the back seat, I noticed a Bible resting there. Somehow, that tiny detail gave me the false comfort I needed. I climbed inside. The car smelled like damp fabric and tobacco. The man, who introduced himself as Mr. Howard, hobbled around the car with a limp to open the passenger door for me. He explained that it didn't open from the inside. The detail unsettled me, but years of be polite training kept me quiet. At first, the conversation was harmless. He complimented my uniform, told me I reminded him of his late wife, and said her spirit must have led him to help me. He asked if I was still in school, what my hobbies were, but slowly the tone shifted. He asked me, in the same calm voice, if I was on my cycle. I forced a laugh, thinking it must be some bizarre attempt at a joke, and asked why on earth he'd want to know. That's when he looked at me with an unsettling calm and said, "Because if you're fertile, we should start trying for a family right away." Every hair on my body stood up. He went on about how God had kept him lonely for years, but now that he'd found me, someone who looked just like his late wife, it was clearly meant to be. He told me I'd be the one to finally give him the children his wife never could. Then he grabbed my hand, kissed it, and whispered, "I can't wait to show you our new bed." My stomach dropped. I told him I'd forgotten something at work. He waved it off, saying I could get it tomorrow. I told him I had to use the bathroom. He said I could hold it until we got home. He wasn't going to let me out. The rain pounded harder, the windshield wipers squeaking with every beat. As he drove, he rambled about how men were the head of the household, how women had to obey. He spoke of his wedding day, how his wife's father had given her to him. And that's when a thought saved me. I blurted out, "You're going to get my father's permission before marrying me, right? God would want that. Otherwise, we'd be living in sin and the marriage bed wouldn't be holy." He grew tense, then nodded, offended that I'd questioned his knowledge of Scripture. "Of course," he said firmly, "I'd never dishonor God that way." So I directed him toward a street and pointed to a random house far from where I actually lived. This one I told him, "My parents are inside." He slowed the car. I could feel his eyes studying me. "I should come in," he said softly. "To meet them." I forced a smile and shook my head. "Not tonight. I need to tell them first. God would want me to honor them. Come back tomorrow." He agreed, but only reluctantly. He said he'd drive around the block while I packed my clothes. When he finally opened the passenger door from the outside, I stepped out, waved politely, and walked quickly toward the front steps of that fake house. I waved again until his headlights disappeared around the corner. The moment he was gone, I sprinted through the rain, cutting across yards until I reached my own house. I live alone, but I slammed the door, double-bolted it, and shoved the couch in front of it just in case. I didn't sleep a wink that night. I never saw Mr. Howard again. I never called the police, though I wish I had. Within a week, I'd moved in with my boyfriend, and from that night forward, I never waited outside alone again.